Welcome to Zoe Crossdressing. My wife turned me into a feminized sissy. Suki Laura stood before me, her body rigid, her hands shaking with fury. What is the meaning of this? She demanded. I had been at the stove, trying to finish dinner, when I turned around, and my stomach dropped. In Laura's clenched fist was a wrinkled bundle of lace, my panties and stockings. In her other hand, she held my favorite pair of high-heeled sandals. She lifted them like evidence in a trial, and I couldn't speak. My mind went blank. Deep down, I'd always known this day might come. As my hidden wardrobe grew, so did the risk of discovery. So, Laura said coldly, who is she? Someone from your office? That's when it hit me, she had completely misunderstood. She thought I was cheating. Laura, I swear, it's not what you think, I said, my voice barely steady. Oh? Then explain it, she snapped, clearly unconvinced. I froze. What would hurt her more, believing I'd betrayed her, or knowing her husband had been hiding something far stranger? I knew one thing for certain, if she thought I was unfaithful, our marriage would be over. So I chose the truth. Slowly, awkwardly, I confessed everything, my secret fantasies, my hidden clothes, the part of myself I'd kept buried for 3 years. I spoke as clearly as I could, my heart racing the entire time. Laura listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable, as if she were weighing every word. Then I led her to the computer. I showed her the sites I visited, the profiles I'd created, even the chat rooms where I'd spent countless nights pretending to be busy with work while talking as someone else entirely. To my surprise, her anger faded. She didn't look disgusted. If anything, she looked intrigued. What's your username? She asked, glancing at the screen. Juliet, I said softly. Juliet, she repeated with a small smile. That's adorable. And everyone here is like you? Mostly, I replied. Sometimes real women join, but usually it's people like me, or women curious because of their partners. And what do you talk about? Clothes. Makeup. Hair. Fantasies. She nodded slowly, clearly thinking. Finally, I asked, you're not angry? No, she said. You're not having an affair. You're not sneaking around with other women. I don't see a problem. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I nearly collapsed. Years of fear vanished in an instant. Thank you, I whispered. You have no idea how scared I was to tell you. Laura laughed gently. Leave you over this? Never. Honestly, I find it kind of sweet. What had begun as a nightmare was transforming into something unbelievable. Actually, she added, handing the lingerie and heels back to me, I'd love to see what kind of girl you make. Go upstairs and get yourself ready. I'll finish dinner. For the first time ever, I didn't rush or hide. I took my time. I applied my makeup carefully, traced my lips with the liner I'd bought but never dared to use, brushed mascara onto my lashes, and added a soft touch of eyeshadow. I slipped into pastel panties and stood staring at my closet, nervous and excited. After a few moments, I chose a simple yellow skirt and a matching halter top. There was no time for my hair, so I tied it back with one of Laura's scrunchies. I skipped stockings and slid into my sandals, gripping the banister as I descended the stairs, my knees trembling. Laura turned and whistled. I felt my face burn red as she laughed. You know, Bruce, or should I say Julia, you actually look pretty good. That outfit is absolutely charming. She asked me to turn around, and I did, my heart pounding. I love that top, she said. And those sandals make your feet look so delicate. You should paint your toes. I admitted I had before, just never when she might notice. She smiled knowingly. That explains why you always wore socks to bed. I didn't trust myself to speak. I was terrified that one wrong word might shatter the moment. Well, Laura said softly, I suppose you don't have to worry about that anymore, do you? I shook my head, still stunned, hardly believing what was happening. It felt unreal, like fortune had struck without warning. "There's just one little issue," Laura added as she stepped closer, lightly pressing against the front of my skirt. "This part here ruins the silhouette." I nodded, unable to form words. "Let's forget about dinner for now," she murmured. "Come upstairs, Juliet." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Maybe you could love me the way a girl would." "Would you like that?" "Yes," I managed, nodding eagerly. "Very much." "So would I," she said with a smile. "I've never been with another woman before." That hour together felt unlike anything I'd ever known, more intense, more intimate than even our earliest days. I experienced things I'd only ever imagined. Over the following months, our relationship slowly but unmistakably shifted. Laura embraced my transformation with enthusiasm. She asked me to print the stories and fantasies that resonated with me most. She read them carefully, marking passages, scribbling thoughts in the margins. She guided me through shopping trips, taught me how to apply makeup properly, and helped me style my hair. Small surprises appeared regularly, earrings for my newly pierced ears, accessories chosen just for me. With her help, even my everyday clothes became subtly androgynous, wearable at work. Even when I wasn't dressed up, I felt different, lighter, freer. After years of secrecy, I could finally explore that part of myself openly, with her support. I felt blissfully content. Laura asked only one thing in return, that I help more around the house. Eager to show my gratitude, I took on nearly all the chores without hesitation. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the balance between us changed. Laura began managing our finances, our plans, even deciding when and where we went out. She insisted on driving everywhere. It wasn't until much later that I realized something else had changed too. I hadn't been with her as a man in months. It hadn't seemed important. Not to either of us. So when she casually mentioned one evening that she wanted to start seeing a man from her office, I thought I must have misunderstood. But as she continued speaking, so calmly, as though confiding in a girlfriend, I knew she was serious. There was someone named Greg. They liked each other. He'd been pursuing her for a while, and she'd always declined. Until now. "I think you can accept this," she said gently. "The way things are." I struggled to respond. "You're talking about an affair," I said weakly. "Don't you love me anymore?" "Of course I do," she replied, surprised. "I thought this was okay with you. I thought you didn't mind me dressing this way." "I don't." "Then why?" "Because I need a man in my life." I protested, reminding her that I was her husband. Laura paused, turned toward me, and studied my face. She brushed my hair back carefully. "Look at yourself," she said quietly. "Do you really look like a husband?" I had no answer. I lay there in a soft nightgown, polished nails, glossed lips, mascara still on my lashes. "I read every story you printed for me," she continued gently. "I see what you're becoming. I want to help you, but you have to think about me too. We'll still be married. You'll still matter. But you have to meet me halfway." We didn't speak of it again that night. I was too afraid to bring it up later. For a while, I hoped she'd changed her mind. Then, a week later, during lunch at a small cafe after a morning of shopping, she told me she'd be having dinner with Greg the next evening. I froze but said nothing. That night at home was painfully quiet. When she reached for me in bed, I turned away. She sighed and went to sleep. I lay awake, sick with doubt and fear, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. I wanted reassurance. I wanted her touch. I whispered her name into the darkness, but she was already asleep. The next morning, I made her breakfast. She acted as though nothing was wrong, cheerful, relaxed. I, on the other hand, was tense and unsettled. I went through my chores, fixed lunch, barely eating, while she worked on her computer. If she noticed, she didn't say a word. She said nothing all day, moving through the hours as if nothing unusual were about to happen. That quiet normalcy made it worse. Late afternoon, I heard the shower start upstairs, and my stomach tightened. This was really happening. My wife was getting ready to go out with another man, and I was powerless to stop it. I pictured the black dress she owned, the one I'd bought for her on our first anniversary. I wondered if she'd chosen it deliberately. "Don't look so miserable, Juliet," she said gently before leaving. "It's not the end of the world." She lifted my chin and kissed me softly. The faint trace of her lipstick lingered long after the door closed behind her. I didn't know what else to do. I poured myself a glass of chilled white wine, carried it into the bathroom, lit candles and incense, and sank into a hot bath. I tried not to imagine Laura and Greg together, but my mind refused to cooperate. What unsettled me most was the confusing response my body had whenever the thought crept in. Eventually, I dried off, slipped into my favorite red silk teddy, buckled on my heels, and poured another glass of wine. Then I went to the computer room. The chat rooms were busy, it was the weekend. Before long, I found myself confiding in familiar usernames, explaining what was happening. They sympathized, but to my surprise, every single one of them sided with Laura. Candy summed it up bluntly, "What did you expect, Juliet? Of course she was going to want a real man eventually. And you showed her the stories you liked. We've role-played enough for me to know, this is exactly what turns you on. Admit it." I hated that she was right. I'd always kept my fantasies neatly separated from real life. Now those walls were crumbling, and I felt unsteady trying to adjust. I stayed online longer than I meant to, slowly calming down. I lost track of time entirely, until I heard the front door unlock. Laura's voice floated in from the entryway. Then a man laughed. "Greg." Panic shot through me. I had to hide. No, not the bedroom. They might go there. The spare room? I'd have to pass them. My only option was to shut the computer room door and hope I wasn't noticed. As I closed it, resentment flared. Of all places, she brought him here. Our home. Our space. A knock came almost immediately. "Juliet, sweetheart?" Laura called. "Come out here. There's someone I want you to meet." I stood frozen, heart racing, praying she'd change her mind. "Don't be ridiculous," she said sharply. "You're embarrassing me." There was no escape. I opened the door slowly. Laura's face lit up as she looked me over. "Oh, you look delicious," she said. "My favorite red nightie, and is that lavender? Did you dress up for us?" Before I could respond, or even process the idea, she took my arm and guided me into the living room. I focused desperately on staying upright in my heels. "Greg," she said brightly, "this is Juliet." The man near the fireplace turned toward us. He was striking, tall, broad-shouldered, blonde, with sharp features and confident blue eyes. His tailored suit barely concealed his powerful build. "So this is the lady of the house," he said with an easy grin. I stood there speechless. There was no pretending, no posturing. In my heels, nightwear, and makeup, toughness would have been absurd. He towered over me, stronger in every visible way. Seeing him, I finally understood Laura's attraction, and the realization made my stomach flutter uneasily. "Juliet," Laura said firmly, "don't be rude. Say hello." "Hi, Greg," I said quietly. Laura's tone grew firmer, as if she were settling into a role she had already rehearsed. "Since Greg and I are going to be spending a lot of time together," she said calmly, "we decided it would be best if you accepted your position in this arrangement quickly." I stared at her, lost. She caught the confusion on my face and continued without hesitation. "What that means," she said, "is that I don't want to hear any complaining. No sulking. And definitely none of that tired, half-hearted pretending at being a man. As far as I'm concerned, you gave that up yourself. Do you understand?" The words hit harder than I expected. Hearing them spoken aloud was painful enough, but hearing them said in front of someone else was almost unbearable. My cheeks burned. I looked at Laura, silently begging for mercy, but she gave none. Worse still, I could feel Greg watching, clearly entertained. I didn't dare meet his eyes. Do I make myself clear? Laura asked again, her voice sharp and unfamiliar. Yes, I said quietly. Good, she replied. Then let's see if you really understand. Kneel. For a moment I hoped I'd misheard. I hadn't. I'm not repeating myself, she snapped. My legs weakened as I lowered myself carefully, adjusting my feet so the heels didn't dig in. My heart was racing, fear and humiliation tangled together. Your tie, Laura said to Greg. He handed it to her without hesitation. A moment later, I felt my wrists guided together. Come on, she said. Upstairs. The three of us moved toward the bedroom. I felt small, exposed, completely at their mercy. Once inside, Laura pushed me back onto the bed and approached slowly, her expression unreadable. Greg stood nearby, unhurried, confident. What followed left me shaken and overwhelmed, my fantasies colliding fully with reality in a way I hadn't been prepared for. And from that moment on, nothing between us was ever the same.